I could hear a loud banging coming from the hallway. I thought about grabbing a pool cue just to protect myself. I'm Tom Stewart, and this is my paranormal story. Before I start this episode, as always, I want to thank a few people who made donations to the podcast. Thank you to Elizabeth Levesque from Texas and Morgan L. from Indiana for your generosity. My podcast is free, and I never make you pay for extra material or bonus episodes. So if you'd like to support the podcast and help me keep it running, just click on the donate button on the website at myparanormalstory.com. I've also got mugs and t-shirts for sale too, because podcasts cost money, and every little bit helps, so thank you. Also, thanks for all your emails and social media messages. If you ever have any comments or thoughts about an episode, or if you have a question, or if you want to tell me your paranormal story, you can email me at myparanormalstorypodcast@gmail.com. I always respond. Oh, and if you have a podcast of your own and you'd like to have me as a guest, I'd love to hear from you. Just shoot me an email and tell me all about yourself and your podcast, and we can pick a time and a date. We can talk about spooky stories or paranormal investigation or whatever you want. I always do lots of interviews during the spooky season, so shoot me an email if you'd like, and maybe you can have me as a guest on your podcast. I think it would be fun. So now that that's out of the way, here is my latest episode. I've always said I'm more afraid of the living than I am the dead. But sometimes they can both be pretty scary. I was probably 19 or 20 years old and going to college full time and trying to work as much as possible to pay for it. And one of the jobs I had back then was as a mobile DJ. I was working for a company in Rhode Island that would contract me out to play music and MC events around the area. Sometimes it would be weddings or anniversary parties, but a lot of times it would be local lounges and dive bars. And being the new guy in the company, I was stuck working most of the worst gigs you can imagine. One of them was this place called Brothers Lounge. It was this seedy little bar in a town called Central Falls, Rhode Island. But don't let the name deceive you. Back then, and probably still today, Central Falls was known as a rough area. Lots of crime and drugs, gangs. It was one of those places where you wouldn't walk down the street alone, during the day or especially at night. And Brothers Lounge was one of the favorite places for the locals to hang out. Every weekend, I would be paid $75 to play music for 4 hours, from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. But that meant I'd have to get there early, like about 8 o'clock, to carry all of my equipment in and set up on time. And then at the end of the night, I'd be there till about 2 a.m., breaking down my equipment and loading it back into my car. See, this was like the early 1990s, and DJs weren't using computers back then. MP3s, I don't think had even been invented yet. Even CDs weren't all that common. I was DJing with records. Vinyl 45 records. If you're too young to know what those are, ask your parents. Every weekend, I would have to carry in 2 huge wooden boxes filled with hundreds of 45s, plus 2 turntables, a mixer, and some other stuff. Luckily, the speakers were already there. But it was still a pain in the ass most nights, especially if there were a lot of people already in the bar and in my way. At night, when the bar was empty, it was a lot easier to carry my equipment out, but it was also a lot scarier because of who might still be hanging around outside. By 1 a.m., most people were already drunk or high, and I'd be outside by myself carrying expensive equipment to my car. I lived in constant fear that someone was going to jump me and steal my equipment. And one night, it almost happened. It was close to 2 a.m., and I was loading my equipment into my car when two young guys, clearly drunk, started giving me a hard time, talking about how much my turntables must be worth, and I felt one of them put his hand on my shoulder, and I instinctively grabbed one of the wooden covers to my record boxes, and I swung it at him like a weapon, and he jumped out of the way, and I stood there holding it, that box lid, just ready to protect myself and my equipment. And then, to my relief, from out of nowhere, the owner of the lounge came out and scared the two guys away. His name was Manny, and he was a big dude. Easily over 6 feet tall, a huge broad chest, like 250, maybe 300 pounds. And I think he had a reputation in town for being a guy you don't mess with. Every weekend I would see him at the bar, and I would see how people showed him respect. Not just as the owner, but as a leader in the community. But even when I knew Manny had my back, I was always still a little worried about leaving the bar at night. And most nights, I would procrastinate, pack everything up slowly, hoping that if I wait long enough, most of the drunks and degenerates will have gone home or moved on. But one night, while waiting around after hours, it wasn't the people outside that gave me a scare. It was the things happening inside. Brothers Lounge is an old building, probably been there 60 years or more. I'm not sure if it's still around. I haven't been down that way in a long time. The lounge was on the first floor. The second and third floor had empty apartments or offices that no one was using. And Brothers was your typical skeevy small town bar, dark and smoky. Smoky because back then people could still smoke cigarettes in bars. It had a horseshoe-shaped bar with a bunch of old stools around it and a pool table on the other side of the room. In the back, there was a raised area that had some cocktail tables and chairs and a small dance floor. And that's where I would set up. In between the bar area and the seating area, there was this little nook that I could close off with a couple of tables and turn into kind of a DJ booth. And I'd set up my turntables in front of me and put all my records behind me. It closed me off from the people a little bit, but they were still able to come over to the front area and talk to me and make requests. And they would do that all night. And they always requested the worst songs too. I hated playing anything slow or sappy because it would bring down the mood of the room. I didn't want to play anything so slow that it would make people leave and then I'd get fired. But I also didn't want to play any music that was too heavy or loud and get people all riled up. The lounge was already always full of people on the edge. Just about anything could trigger a fight. Even a song. And fights weren't uncommon either. Usually they would fight over the pool table, or maybe two guys would fight over some girl. But either way, I always tried to keep my music somewhere in the middle so people's moods wouldn't change too much. But I remember one night, the bar was like half full and I was playing some poppy top 40 songs for a couple of young women who were having a good time dancing near the pool table. When suddenly some guy in a sports coat and jeans comes up to my DJ booth to request a song. He was dressed like he was trying to look important, like someone pretending they were in the mob or something. He wanted me to play some old, sleepy R&B song, a song I knew was going to kill the mood, especially for the women dancing. So I sort of brushed him off by saying, "Let me look and see if I have it." You know, it's kind of like DJ talk for I'm not playing that song. But a few songs later, he came back to my DJ booth asking me if I found the song yet. And I told him I'm having some trouble finding it. Then with a serious look on his face, he says to me, "I think you should find it and play it right now." And as he was saying it, he pulled his sports coat to the side to show me the gun he had in his belt. No song is worth being shot over. So I immediately found the record and played it for him by special request for my new friend. Just thinking about that DJ job has me feeling anxious, even 30 years later. I don't know how I did it. But one night, after everyone had left, it was the bar itself that had me spooked. It started earlier in the night, when some guy in the bar all of a sudden started yelling at the bartender. I think the bartender's name was Brandy or something like that. She was in like her late 20s, maybe early 30s. Tough looking gal, and she didn't take any crap from anyone. And most of the people who hung out in the bar liked her. She was good at her job. But every once in a while, like all bartenders, she'd have to deal with some jerks. Now I'm not sure what this guy's problem was. I'd never seen him in the bar before. But he was pissed off and shouting at Brandy about something. And she was shouting back at him. All of a sudden, the guy charged around the bar as if he was going to attack Brandy. And a few of the regulars at the bar quickly stood up to go stop him, but they didn't have to. Somehow, the guy fell backwards and hit his head on the wall. I can still remember it as if it happened yesterday. It's like slow motion. It looked almost as if someone had pushed him, but there was no one in front of him. As he got up and stumbled around, a couple of the regulars grabbed him and threw him out the front door. But that moment has always stuck with me. Because if he had tripped on like the rubber bar mat or a cord or something on the floor, he would have fallen forward, not backward. And no one was even near him when he fell. Normally, I wouldn't even think twice about a drunk guy falling over. But later that night, more weird things started to happen. Once the bar closed and everyone left, like usual, Brandy locked the front door and got busy cleaning up. I took my usual time packing up my equipment, but as I started to head to the door with one of my boxes, Brandy asked me if I wouldn't mind staying with her for a little while. Manny, the owner, usually showed up before the bar closed to help Brandy with the cleanup, but he wasn't there yet. And with what had happened earlier with the guy trying to attack her, she didn't want to be in the bar alone. So I agreed to stay. I mean, I was in no hurry to see who might be waiting outside for me anyways. Brandy gave me a beer and I sat at the bar as she wiped down bottles and cleaned up the place. Then at one point she said, "I'll be right back. I need to go into the basement and change some kegs." So she headed to the back of the bar through a dark hallway and disappeared down a set of stairs. And all of a sudden I was sitting all alone in the dark in a quiet bar, with no one talking, no music playing. It was kind of eerie. I could hear the occasional car drive by, but other than that, it was an uncomfortable silence. Then all of a sudden, behind me, I heard a weird sound. It sounded like one of the balls on the pool table started rolling from one end to the other. I swiveled around on my stool to see what it was, and suddenly, two of the pool balls went crashing into each other, like someone had just took a shot. I looked around like, who just did that? I stood up and walked towards the pool table slowly to see what could have made the pool balls move, when suddenly, to my right, I heard a crashing sound. 2 or 3 pool cues that were leaning up against the wall had fallen down right at my feet, and I jumped back startled. Like, what the hell is going on? And that's when the banging started. I could hear loud banging coming from the hallway. Almost sounded like someone was trying to break in. I thought about grabbing one of those pool cues as a weapon, and then I heard someone screaming my name. "Tom! Tom!" It was Brandy. So I ran to the doorway and down the stairs to a door that was locked. And Brandy was on the other side, yelling at me to open it. I pulled and I pulled on the door, and it wouldn't budge. Finally, I pulled one more time, and the door flew open as if someone had just unlocked it. I almost fell over as Brandy came running out of the dark room and up the stairs, and I quickly followed her. She ran behind the bar like it was her safe space. All out of breath, she was like, "Someone turned off the lights and closed the door on me," she said. "But I thought we were the only ones here," I said. "We are," she answered. We just stared at each other like, what's going on? What are we going to do? She wasn't cleaning anymore, and I wasn't drinking my beer. We both just sort of stood there silent, waiting to see what else was going to happen. But after a few minutes, we both calmed down. She got back to work, and I sat back down on my stool. And then it happened again. This time, from the front door. I nearly fell off my stool. "Brandy, open the door," the voice said from outside. It was the owner, Manny. Brandy let him in and was pissed at him for being late. "Weird stuff was happening again, Manny," she told him angrily. And he laughed. "It's just ghosts, Brandy. They won't hurt you." My Paranormal Story is written, produced, and narrated by me, Tom Stewart. Music from this episode courtesy of Kevin MacLeod at Incomptech.com. If you enjoy my stories and would like to support the podcast, visit my website at myparanormalstory.com. Just click on the donate button, or if you want, I also have t-shirts and coffee mugs for sale. Unfortunately, podcasts cost money, and your support helps me keep this running. So every little bit helps. You can also check out my book called The 10 Best Tools for Ghost Hunting. If you've ever wanted to learn more about the gadgets used in paranormal investigation, you can check it out on Audible, Kindle, or Amazon.com. Please help my podcast grow by sharing your favorite episodes with your friends on social media. And feel free to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Just search for My Paranormal Story. If you have a podcast and would like to have me as a guest, or if you'd like to ask me a question or tell me your paranormal story, you can email me at myparanormalstorypodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. I'm Tom Stewart, and this is My Paranormal Story.